Hello. I'm
Morning.
David Hursh. I'm a professor
Afternoon.
in education at the Warner School of Education at the University of Rochester. I've been there for 25 years. For the last 15 years, my research has focused on the negative consequences of high-stakes testing in New York. And so that's the area in which I have my research expertise. Thank you for holding this forum. Oh, I wrote a 5-minute statement. I think it's down to 3. Thank you for holding this forum. I believe public education is at a crossroads where we have two choices. We can continue for the last 15 years of increased standardized testing in schools, which is, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, resulted in slower or no growth and widened achievement gap. Or we can engage in real reform, working with teachers to develop rich, challenging curriculum, better formative and summative assessments, and work with community members to improve the lives of our families by providing healthcare, jobs, and safe communities. The first choice is exemplified by the Common Core state standards. As you all know by now, only 31% of New York State students passed the exams. Commissioner King described the results as, quote, a good thing, because it provides us with, quote, a baseline. In response, I ask, if our students are really doing so poorly, doesn't that prove that the reform movement of increased testing and regimentation of the curriculum has failed? And doesn't the past years of testing already provide a baseline? Commissioner King states that the Common Core curriculum and testing equals high standards, and implies that anyone who doesn't agree with him has lower standards. I have been an educator for over 40 years, and in my text that I'll leave for you, I describe some of the things I've done with students, including producing television shows, websites, doing local histories, etc. And so I am not against high standards. I am for creating schools that have higher standards than the Common Core standards. My problem with the Common Core is that through the hasty development and implementation and increased standardized testing, less time is devoted to teaching and learning. I think one of the things that you really need to know about New York State is that none of the test scores have any validity. You cannot tell whether students are learning because test scores have gone up, whether their learning is improving because test scores have gone up, or that their learning has declined because the test scores have gone down. The test scores are manipulated by the commissioner to yield whatever results he wants to look good. I can give hundreds of examples, but just one. Over the last decade, New York State's test scores have increased at what I would describe, and did describe, as an unbelievable rate, for which commissioners of education and also New York City's mayor took credit. Finally, Chancellor Tisch, and this is one of the times when I agreed with her, admitted that the test scores were, quote, ridiculously inflated and, quote, should not be believed. Test scores were rescaled, and for example, instead of 68.8% of students scoring proficient on the English exams, only 42% were. Similarly, with the Common Core test that we had in last spring, it was purposely designed so that we would have a high failure rate. That was intentional. In response to the low test scores, Commissioner King and Chancellor Tisch ignore the harm that testing has already done to children and teachers, and promise that the test scores will rise next year. Now, since they can manipulate the test score to have it come out however they want, I think we can be guaranteed that, in fact, there will be higher test scores next year because they will make sure it is done. In the meantime, they are ignoring the harm that standardized testing and the Common Core has on our children and teachers. Therefore, I side with the majority of parents and teachers who now think that there is too much testing in schools and are encouraged by their passion and motivation. However, we need to talk about more than just test scores, and we are still failing our children and society. We need at minimum to do the following, and I want to at least say some things we should do positively. One, given that test scores are closely related to family and neighborhood poverty rates, we also need an economic agenda that provides jobs and hope for both parents and teachers. There is no point to being college and career ready if the only jobs available are minimum wage. Second, we need to have community conversations about the kind of education we want for our children. 3, we need to look and incorporate other models of assessment, assessments that tell us more than whether a student is a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. 4, we are pushing excellent teachers out of the teaching profession and discouraging university students from becoming teachers. Jack Langeret testified earlier that, in fact, and I see this with my own students, when they are placed in public schools, the teachers are telling them, no, turn back, change your major, don't become teachers. It's not a profession worth entering anymore. And I recently surveyed all the local colleges and found out that they now have half the enrollment in the teacher education programs that they had 3 years ago. We have to stop blaming teachers for the limitations of our educational system. We have to remember that all parents and teachers want their children and students to do well. So we need to rebuild trust in our teachers and work toward and improve our schools and communities. 5th, we need a 3-year moratorium on the Common Core tests so that we can sit down in our communities and develop strategies and curriculum so that we have excellent schools. We need real, honest conversations like the one we're having here. I have been so impressed with the hearings and the intelligence of our parents and teachers. 6th, and because all of the above requires that we have a Commission of Education who educators, parents, and community members feel can listen and engage in real dialogue. And our commissioner is no longer that person. Commissioner King needs to resign. Thank you.
David, let me ask you one question. You mentioned Commissioner King a
Yes.
couple of times in the speech. Where does he send his children to school?
Well, he says he sends it to a Montessori school in New York City.
Not a public school.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.